afternoon. I am quite honored to be back here at my alma mater. I graduated from Valpo back in '02 with a bachelor's in music education. Did that for about 6 years as a band director, and then I went on and got my master's degree from Purdue Cal in school counseling. I completed that in '09, did that for 3 years, and now I stay at home with my 3 boys. They're 8, 5, and 6. I love them dearly. They're a joy 90% of the time. And I'm married to Mr. Dan Kenning. He's an adjunct here in physics and astronomy. He's here to critique me, I think, today. So I'm going to tell you about my experience. I'm going to do the best I can to fit my last 4 years of my life into 40 minutes or less. So we will be skipping over some of these slides. But I want to start out with some t-shirts. I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of t-shirts at home that kind of tell the story of my life. I've got t-shirts from my high school. I've got t-shirts from musicals I was involved in, t-shirts from marching band, t-shirts from sports, and I'm sure all you do too. If you're in a sorority, I've got letters from my sorority. And if I were to go through and look at all my t-shirts, they would kind of tell the story of what I've done the last 20 years of my life. And I have 3 new t-shirts, which I kind of treasure because they are the t-shirts of my AML adventure that I went on, unexpectedly. There's this first one, which was done as a fundraiser shortly after I was diagnosed. My husband works at Wheeler High School, and I used to work there. And so they made up these shirts. It says Team Tammy and Hope, and it's in the leukemia awareness color of orange. And they sold these, and they gave the proceeds to my family to help cover medical bills and meals and all that kind of stuff. So this was my early diagnosis days. I was lucky enough to get AML twice, bonus. When I got it the second time, I had to go through a transplant. And so that was this t-shirt. That's through Be the Match, and the Be the Match organization found a donor for me and saved my life, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. So that's my second t-shirt. And then my third, I just got yesterday. I went to the Survivors Picnic at Loyola, and I am proud to say that I am a 2.5-year survivor, and that's my latest t-shirt, and I'm hopefully it's my last t-shirt in my leukemia journey. So I'm going to give you a ton of information. If you have questions, I don't have a life. I have nowhere to be until 5:30 this evening. So when I'm done, I'm happy to hang out there for those of you that don't have to be anywhere if you want to ask further questions after our time is up here. So, ironically, today's September 24th. It was exactly 4 years ago today that I found the AML myself. My doctor missed it. Leading up to diagnosis, we were in Nashville in July of 2014. It's obviously much hillier landscape than it is here. We were walking through my sister-in-law's subdivision, and I was out of breath. I was short of breath. I thought, well, I'm overweight. I've had 3 kids in the last 4 years. That's probably all it is. Didn't think much more of it. Came home. I had a skin infection. Shortly after that, I had severe joint pain, especially in my right shoulder. I had a gum abscess. I had a cold and a cough that I just could not shake. And finally, they did blood work. Now, throughout all of that, that was about 3 months worth of issues. And I went to the doctor, my local primary care doctor, who I don't go to anymore, by the way. And he had one excuse after another. He would give me antibiotics. He said, oh, you're fatigued. You've got 3 young boys. Of course you're tired. Of course your joints hurt. You keep lifting them up. And he attributed it all to something around on those lines. Finally, when I went back in the middle of September, he said, okay, you've been in here enough, we got to do some blood work. And he did. I didn't really think much ahead of time to look at my results. I just took his word for it. And they were not good. My platelets were low, my hemoglobin was low, my white count was high. And he said, well, you could possibly be fighting an infection. He did more blood work. For a while, we thought I had mono, which clearly I did not. And eventually, I asked him, I said, do you think I have leukemia or lymphoma? Now, I'm not a bio major. I never was. I took anatomy and physiology in high school. I took bio 2 here as a freshman. because I wanted to be a bio minor, but music ed doesn't allow for such luxuries. So I knew enough to know that something was seriously wrong. So I asked him again, are you sure I don't have leukemia or lymphoma? And he said, no, you're too young, you're too healthy, it doesn't look like this. He said, make an appointment with the hematologist, go see Dr. Klein over at Porter for anemia. So I did. It was the end of September, and I couldn't get in until the end of October, and fine. It still bothered me. I knew something was more wrong than that. It was more than anemia. So I got online on Porter's website, and you can look at your own test results. And I did. And it was September 24th, exactly 4 years ago, when I looked at them, and I saw things that I had never seen before in blood. One of them was blasts. Blasts are baby cells. If you've got blasts in your blood, they're not supposed to be there. So that was bad news. The other thing I saw was called Auer rods, A-U-E-R, Auer rods. Has anybody here ever heard of them? That's good. It's a good thing. I'd never heard of them either. Until I Googled it, and the first site that came up was a nursing website, and it said, if your patient has Auer rods, it's a diagnostic factor for, or a diagnostic indication for AML, acute myeloid leukemia. And my heart sunk, and I'm like, okay, I do have leukemia. I remember elbowing my husband and saying, I have leukemia. I think he was in denial, and he didn't really want to think about it until we heard it from the doctor, but I knew. So that night, obviously, I didn't sleep much. Called Dr. Klein first thing the next morning, and she said, you need to get in here. So I went into Porter. I had a bone marrow biopsy done. I was diagnosed within a couple hours, and then right away that evening, I was already up at Loyola for treatment. So now what? That's what I was leaving behind. Those 3 adorable boys there and that decent-looking husband of mine. I had to leave them. I did not know if I was ever going to come home. We had to tell my kids that I was very sick. My little guy had just turned 1. He wasn't even walking yet. My middle one, Ryan, he was in preschool. And then my oldest, I don't know. They were 1, 2, and 4. So I guess Ryan wasn't even in preschool yet. They were little. And I remember having to tell them, Mommy's very sick, and the only thing I could think to say is, I'm going to lose all my hair. Because you can't tell a 1, a 2, and a 4-year-old Mommy might die. Like, that's not going to go over well. So we went with, I'm going to lose all my hair. We had very little time to get things together. Thankfully, my mother and father-in-law, my aunts and uncle-in-law, my mom, they all kind of came together and took control. And they would take turns. Who was watching the kids? Who was taking care of me? Who was making sure the house was in order? Getting groceries, all that kind of stuff. I ended up in the hospital for 5 weeks initially, and that was to get me it was to get me into remission, not back into remission, that's later. So I had to get into remission, and that was done with some pretty powerful chemo that you have to be inpatient for. That's called the induction. There was all kinds of chemo precautions. We had to make sure that none of my bodily fluids, tears, sweat, saliva, anything, mixed with anybody else. So I had to do separate laundry. If you used the bathroom, I had to flush the toilet twice just to make sure there was no remnants of anything. That chemo was so toxic, one time it spilled, and they sent in a hazmat team to clean it up, which is a little unsettling because they're putting it into me. But a hazmat team has to touch it and clean it up. So it was some pretty serious stuff. Side effects were brutal. I had fevers, sometimes as high as 105 or a little bit higher. The biggest thing that I remember is the smells. People smelled. My husband and my kids smelled like sour milk. My house smelled when I got home because the chemo kills everything that is a rapidly reproducing cell. So your hair, your nails, your skin, the cells in your nose, your taste buds, they're all killed off. So for a while I couldn't taste anything, and anything I could taste tasted awful, and I couldn't smell anything except for things that smelled bad, even when they didn't really smell bad in real life. First weekend I was able to come home was Halloween. I was so extremely weak, but I was determined that I was going to go trick-or-treating with those 3 kids. That Halloween, I had 3 little monsters from Sesame Street. I had a Grover, an Elmo, and a Cookie Monster. And how do you say no to those kids that want to go trick-or-treating? So I went. I think I made it about 2 houses, and then I ended up back in our car because I didn't have the energy. But I at least was able to go for a little bit. The next steps after the induction is I got 4 bonus rounds of consolidation because the induction only kills off the first batch of leukemic cells and it gets you in remission, but those cells are going to keep reproducing and taking over your bone marrow if they don't do something further. So I had 4 more rounds of what they call consolidation chemo. It is not quite as strong as the induction, but you still have the side effects. And it's all inpatient. It wasn't for 5 weeks this time. I was only in for like 3 to 5 days, but 4 rounds of that. In the 6 months between my diagnosis and the end of my treatment, I was in the hospital for a total of 12 weeks, so over half that time. When I was home, I was too sick to really do anything. Couldn't really hang out with my kids. They had too many germs. I couldn't get sick. I didn't have the energy to anyways. So it was a very long 6 months. On top of all that, I also had leukemic cells in my cerebral spinal fluid. That only happens in less than 3% of all AML patients. Like I said, I was very lucky. I ended up having it in my cerebral spinal fluid. Because of that, now I have a fancy pump in the top of my head. What they used to do to get the intrathecal chemo into my cerebral spinal fluid was to do lumbar punctures. After about 15 to 20 of those, they decided to stop torturing me and actually just put a pump in my head. In order to do that, I had to have some brain surgery. That was exciting. And now I have this pump in my head with a 5 to 7 inch catheter that goes directly into my brain. I'm not sure if it helped or hindered my brain, but it's there. And it's called an Omaya pump. It'll be there for the rest of my life because it's more risky to take it out than to leave it in. Along with all this, I participated in quite a few clinical trials. I've honestly lost count at this point. I would guess it's upwards of 10 to 12. And one of them, the protocol for it was that they would run my DNA and my HLA markers through the match system, through the donation bank, to see if I had any matches if I were to need a stem cell transplant. At that point, we were not talking about stem cell transplants anymore. They had decided I wouldn't need one. And in June of 2015, I got a phone call from one of my nurses or the doctor and said, hey, just wanting you to know that we did run you through the Be the Match program and you have a genetic mutation. It would never affect you unless you needed a stem cell transplant. And if you were to need a stem cell transplant, we would probably never find you a donor because of this mutation. So I was like, okay, well, right now, I'm not planning on relapsing. No one expects me to relapse, so it's probably not going to be an issue. I was given a good prognosis. Again, like I said, no one expected me to relapse because of these things. Number one, I had a good subtype. Now, when they stage leukemia, they don't stage it like breast cancer or colon cancer or any solid tumors. What they do is they tell you what the subtype is. There's 2 ways that they do that. The top one is the French-American-British classification. It's really not used much anymore, and 4 years ago when they subtyped me, it was kind of being phased out. But I was M4. All that means is it mainly affected my monocytes. So what they do use more frequently today is the WHO, the World Health Organization. That classification for me was that I had a normal karyotype, which meant I had no chromosomal abnormalities. And I had a good mutation. I had the MPM1 mutation, which was a favorable prognosis. Also, I was young-ish, 34 when I was diagnosed. And I had normal cytogenetics. I had no abnormalities. And I was otherwise healthy. So they really thought, based on all of those things, that I wasn't going to relapse and I was going to have, a good outlook. Sometimes people ask me, how did you get AML? We don't know. The risk factors for having AML are male, which clearly I'm not. People over 65 are more at risk. I didn't fit that either. I'm not a smoker. I never have been. To my knowledge, I've never had high exposures to benzene or to radiation. I don't have any of the genetic disorders that lend itself to AML. And I've never had prior cancer treatments. So where this came from, nobody knows. Just lucky, I guess. So we get through induction, we get through the first round of consolidation, we get through the second round of consolidation. Things are, on track, going decently well. And one of the major side effects of the chemo is it lowers your platelets, it lowers your hemoglobin, and it lowers your white count. So all of those things together become kind of a hazard if they get too low. So I had to be monitored, and I was on medications, and had all kinds of restrictions of things I could not do. And it was December, right between Christmas and New Year's. My mom and sister were over, and I was talking to my sister, and she looked at me really funny, and she's like, "Do you know your gums are bleeding?" I was like, "What?" And I went and I looked in the mirror, and sure enough, my gums were just spontaneously bleeding, which was clearly a red flag that we had to do something. I also had really sore mouth, your mucosal lining. Because of the chemo, it becomes all inflamed and you get sores, and that goes for your entire digestive tract. So you feel it on both ends, and it's not comfortable. So my husband took me to the ER. Come to find out, when we got to the ER, I was in big danger. My platelet count was 5. Had we gotten in a car accident, I would have bled out and bled to death, and nobody could have stopped it. So we were thankful that we got to the ER. Your normal platelet count should be 150 or higher, so being 5 was quite extreme. Once we got there, they gave me a few bags of platelet transfusions, and I was good to go in 24 hours. Still not normal, but better than what I was. So April 8th, 2015 rolls around, and I am done with the radiation. I had to go through 12 fraction of radiation, so 12 treatments, to make sure that it was out of my cerebral spinal fluid. I was done with my 4 consolidations of chemo, and I was able to, try to get back to normal life. Everyone thought I was going to be fine. I thought I was going to be fine. And January rolls around of 2016. Things are not fine. My nagging cold and cough and the fatigue returned. I had some blood work done. It was a little sketchy, nothing clear, nothing indicative yet that I was relapsing, but it was not looking good. And the doctors were still hopeful that maybe it was virus. Maybe I just had a really bad virus and my body was still recovering from chemo and couldn't quite fight it off. We went as far as having a bone marrow biopsy. I've had 17 of them. None of them were fun. But they didn't give me clear results either. They didn't get enough bone marrow that time to really give an answer. So they sent me back home from Loyola and said, watch and wait. And on January 26th, it was probably late afternoon, my mother-in-law was there, and I said, I've got a fever. And I called the doctor, and the doctor said, well, just have someone take you to the ER for some quick blood work. I didn't say goodbye to my kids. I don't even think I said goodbye to my husband. My mother-in-law took me, and I thought I'd be back in an hour or two. And I never came back for a while. They ended up putting me in an ambulance and drove me to Loyola from Porter because my platelets were so low. Come to find out, I was in fact relapsing. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is my blood test results from when they realized I was relapsing. Oh, I get to use the laser pointer. Maybe not. Okay, so up there, my white count was 0.9. It's supposed to be between 3.5 and 10.5, so clearly my marrow was not responding like the way it's supposed to. My hemoglobin was on the low side. My absolute neutrophil count, which is kind of the indication of how strong your immune system is, mine was 0.3, so again, clearly a problem. Those blasts were back. I had 13% blast in my blood. You're not supposed to have any. And then the kicker was those aura rods up on the top, right up here. Those aura rods were back, so then we knew for sure that I was indeed relapsing. So now what do we do? Well, they told me I have to have a transplant. Now remember, I didn't have any donors. So what do? We prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and hoped and figured somehow, some way God was going to make this doable. I still say it's a miracle. I don't know how these things happen, but my doctor came in and said, you know what, you don't have a genetic mutation. It was a computer glitch, and you've got 8 matches. I have never been so relieved in my life. I don't know how a university as big as Loyola and as prominent has a computer glitch. I say it was God. But I had 8 matches, and I was able then to move forward with the transplant process. So they put me through all kinds of tests. I had, hang on, I'm behind here. All right, I'll get back to my test in a minute. See, I just tend to talk and not pay attention to where I am. To do this transplant, they tell you up front, it's a 50-50 chance that you're going to come out of this alive. It is not real great odds. The chemo itself is called killer chemo for a reason. It kills off all of your marrow, all of your immune system. The side effects are not easy to deal with. And the other side of it is sometimes you still relapse. So it is 50-50. But that's all transplants nation or worldwide, all the different leukemias and lymphomas and blood disorders that they do transplants for. So my odds were slightly better than that. I was younger, I was healthy, I was optimistic. We went into this in April of 2016. In my cohort, the way that they do transplants at Loyola is you kind of go in like as a class. You have to actually go to an education class at Loyola to learn about the transplant process. The caregivers have to go to a class to learn how they're going to take care of you. And in that class, there were 4 of us total that were going to have a transplant. 2 of them, unfortunately, died in the hospital and didn't make it. 2 of us did. And the other person, I'm not sure if she's still alive or not. I've lost contact with her. But that's a clear illustration of those 50-50 odds. There is a high mortality rate involved with all of this. This is an illustration that I think is pretty helpful as far as what happens with the stem cells. You can see that the stem cells come from the bone. Your stem cells are in your bone marrow. And what happens is those stem cells can become anything they want to be in your body. These are the ones that form into blood. They are pluripotent. That means that they can become any kind of blood cell they want. So that stem cell can rapidly reproduce itself, and it can become lymphoid or it can become myeloid. If it goes lymphoid, it's going to turn into either a natural killer cell or a T cell lymphocyte or a B cell lymphocyte. If it goes myeloid, it's going to go neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, monocyte, platelets, or your red blood cells. So that is what I needed to be killed off and then given fresh, new, healthy stem cells. We're going to take a second here and talk about the donor process because this is really important. If there was not someone that was willing to sign up for Be the Match and become a donor, I wouldn't be here because I needed her specific HLA testing or HLA type. The HLA, first let me say, it's not based on your DNA. It doesn't matter who your parents are, who your siblings are. It doesn't matter what your blood type is. What matters is the HLA, and the HLA is human leukocyte. I always have to look it up. Yeah, human leukocyte antigen. It is a marker that's on the surface of your cells, and what that is it's kind of like a strobe light for the immune system. And the immune system looks for that and decides whether that cell belongs or whether that cell is foreign. And if it's foreign, it attacks it and kills it. So the HLA testing is important because I don't want to get someone's cells that don't match my HLA type because my body is going to go haywire and reject it. So that's why they do the HLA testing. It comes from a cheek swab. You get enough DNA on the cheek swab to get you into the system, and then they test that DNA from there to find your HLA type. The HLA type runs in common lines in ethnicities and races. There's a huge demand right now for mixed races and for minorities. But it doesn't really matter who your family is because you only have like a 1 in 4 chance of matching a full-blood sibling, which is why me not having any full-blood siblings, I have 3 half-siblings, so I say I have 1.5 siblings, but they didn't even consider them. It wasn't even an option. So I had an unrelated donor. The cool thing I want to mention, I think it's really cool, you may not. One thing that happens during transplant from an unrelated donor is your blood type changes. So I was born A positive. I was A positive all the way up until like 6 months past my transplant, and now I'm O positive. It's kind of a magical thing, and I don't know how for sure that happens, but it happens. This is a picture of one of the ways they can get your stem cells. If you decide to sign up to be a donor, like I said, it's just a cheek swab. Nobody comes at you with a big needle asking for your bone marrow. That comes later. But there's 2 ways that they can get bone marrow. Most of the time people sign up, you're never going to be approached to be a donor. But if you are, there's 2 ways that they can get it. One is they can go in through the iliac crest, the back of your pelvis, and they can get it from there. They'll go in several different times. The donor is totally under general anesthesia. You don't feel a thing. And they'll get out, I think, 1 to 2 quarts of liquid marrow and blood. And you'll be sore for a couple days at the sites. You may have to, miss work for 2 or 3 days. And then you go on your merry way, and you possibly are able to save someone's life. That's not the most common way anymore. What they typically do today is what my donor did and what most doctors ask for, peripheral blood stem cell, so PBSC. And what they do is in this picture right here, basically it's like donating blood. They take blood out of one arm, send it through an apheresis machine where the centrifuge sorts out the stem cells that they want. Everything they don't want, they put back in your other arm. To do that, that actually takes more time, because you have to have Neupogen, which is a drug that they'll give you for 4 to 5 days before the collection. And what that does is it stimulates your bone marrow to make a whole bunch of stem cells, and then it helps mobilize them out into the blood, where they're really not supposed to be, but that's where they need them to be to collect them. And then you do this. Sometimes they'll collect between 2 and 5 times. So you may have to go into the hospital 2, 3, 4, 5 days in a row. After that, you may have flu-like symptoms for a couple days, and then you're done. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. People always ask, well, who pays for all that? Typically, the recipient's insurance covers that in most cases. So, the other part, I'm an expert on this, because this was actually my job. I was a recipient. I had to go through all kinds of preparation and medical clearance. I pretty much visited every specialty department of Loyola. They all had to sign off that I was healthy enough to do it. I saw a hepatologist, I saw an ENT, cardiac doctor, all kinds, pretty much all of them. I had to go for a psych eval to make sure that I was mentally stable, and also, it's not funny, that I was mentally stable, and also that I had the emotional support at home to get me through this. You cannot go through this alone. They won't even let you. You have to have support. Once I got through all that, we had to do the killer chemo conditioning. So I was admitted April 11th, and they started this chemo. And side effects, yes, I had headaches, I had nausea, I had sores in my mouth, that's that mucositis. I was weak, generally just felt awful. My nurse, who was wonderful, her name was Almeida, I remember her telling me, I had many nurses, but this one I still keep in contact with, she told me, she goes, you can survive this. You have to eat, which was really hard. Nothing tasted good. I lived on ice cream, and I still lost like 70 pounds. You have to move, which was hard, but I would take my IV pole, and we would walk up and down the hallway over and over and over. And you have to stay positive. And I did. I had a lot to fight for. I had those 3 cute boys and my husband and my family and friends, and I was going to win this. And I did, I think. I hope. So the actual transplant day is day 0. Coming up to the transplant, you have your conditioning chemo, and that's that killer chemo. They call that -5 to -1 days. So I went in April 11th, they started that chemo. I think I had 1 day break in between the 2 chemos. And then shortly after that, the transplant came. Now this whole big process that I went through, it was a huge deal. It boiled down to this little tiny bag of blood, this big. It took less than 90 minutes. They, infused it just like a blood transfusion. That's all it was. Now it came from Germany. That was exciting. We were able to track it on like one of the tracker apps from The flight it took from Germany, and it had a courier, and it landed at O'Hare, and the courier brought it to Loyola. So we knew exactly where it was, and it made it to me safely, and they put it in, and everyone just kind of held their breath. Is her body going to reject it? Is she going to have an allergic reaction? And I was fine. It was intense, but I was fine. After that, they wait for engraftment. And it's a little nerve-wracking too. They come in every morning and they tell you what your white count, your platelets, your hemoglobin is, and you're just waiting to make sure that your body's going to accept it. So this is 6 days after. This is called a nadir. This was my lowest blood counts. This lasted for several days. What I really want to highlight up here is, right here, the absolute neutrophil counts. I was 0.0. They literally killed off all of my white blood cells. I had nothing. So if someone came in with a minor cold and happened to sneeze in my general direction, it could have killed me. It was bad news. So that's how low it was, and that's what they wanted. 16 days later, this was engraftment. This was good news. These are my blood test results, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief, like, oh, she might make it. My absolute neutrophil count was up to 2.4. My platelets had gone up a little, my hemoglobin was recovering, my white count was recovering, everything was looking pretty good. And our doctors were relieved, I was relieved, my family was relieved. And then I had to go into isolation. So because I was a very fragile immune system, what little I had, I couldn't be around my own kids, I couldn't be around pets, we had all these restrictions, and I lived too far from Loyola to actually come home and then go back 2 to 3 times a week for fluids and blood transfusions and chemotherapy, or not chemotherapy, for drugs and stuff. So I ended up staying in a hotel. I grew up in Lombard, which is the western suburbs of Chicago, and that's actually where my hotel was, so I kind of went home, and I had to be there for 87 nights. Now, none of you probably have kids, but to be away from your kids for 87 nights is heart-wrenching. Oh my gosh. Especially when they're that little and they don't understand why mommy's gone for so long. They did have a few opportunities to come see me, but they couldn't see me in my hotel room. They had to see me outside. That's what that picture is. And I had to be gowned up and have a mask. I think I had gloves on, and that was it. But they could hug me, and then they had to back off. Like, I couldn't really interact a whole lot with them. We're going to kind of blow through the rest of these real quick. I had all kinds of restrictions. There were things, I had to be on a low bacteria diet. So these are the list of things I could eat. These are the list of things I couldn't eat. Anything that had any kind of chance of having bacteria was off limits. I couldn't eat it, so no yogurt, no fresh fruits or vegetables. All my meat had to be so overcooked that it wasn't even good anymore. My poor caregivers, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them are in this room right now. I would be lost without them. So would my husband and my kids. They gave up their lives for 2.5, 3 years, dropped everything, and were, there for us. And my mom as well. We had people that were coming in from church, from school, from Valparaiso University, sending meals and donations and all kinds of stuff. But my caregivers had the hardest job, and those 4 of them are in the room here. They had to take care of me. I'm a pretty nice person, but when I am sick, I am probably not the easiest to get along with, and I was really, really sick. So this was their responsibilities. I'm going to blow past that. So finally, 100 days post-transplant, they let me go home. I went home on July 31st. Now keep in mind, I was admitted April 11th, so April 11th to July 31st, I was never home. And that was hard on my kids, my husband, my family, and me. And when I would go home, I still had a lot of restrictions. Life was not back to normal by any means, and it's still not today, but it's closer. I talked about the help and the support, the financial considerations. Again, I put a lot of credit to God. Anytime we got these huge medical bills that I was like, Mom, my husband was like, what are we going to do? How are we going to pay this? Within a day, there would be a grant that we applied for would come through, or somebody would send a donation in the mail. We pretty much broke even on an event that really could have financially ruined us. We had excellent insurance too. So, let me very quickly talk about different kinds of conditioning. There's myeloablative, which is what I had. That's that killer chemo. the success rate to keep you in remission is pretty high, but the mortality rate's pretty high too. So it was kind of a give and take. That is what I decided to do. There is also non-myeloablative, which is a little bit less intense, quite a bit less intense. They really reserve that for elderly or people that already have health problems going on before they do this transplant. The mortality rate's lower, but the relapse rate's quite a bit higher. Types of transplants, there is the autologous, autologous. I was a music major. Autologous, and that is where they actually take your own stem cells and give them back to you. They don't do that very often with AML because AML is so rapidly reproducing that it's hard to find a time where there is healthy cells to get. So I had allogeneic. Like I said, I had nobody related to me that could help me, so I had a MUD, a matched unrelated donor. I was fortunate that I had a 10-10 match based on the HLA testing, and my donor was from Germany. She's 4 years older than me, and just this past April I was able to contact her, which was so cool, and now we email back and forth. There is a language barrier. She knows like this much English, and I know like this much German. But I have friends that speak fluent German, and she has friends that speak fluent English, so we can translate back and forth. If I really truly had no donor, I could have used cord blood, which is blood from the umbilical cord of a baby. And the good thing with that is that you don't have to have such specific HLA matches, but the chance of relapse is pretty high. This is just a good diagram I found of the transplant, of an allogeneic transplant process. They show that you can get it out of your vein or out of your hip bone, processes it, gives it to the patient through the blood bag, and it makes it look really simple, but it's really a complicated, miraculous process. But it was a good visual. Graft versus host disease, what that is basically the T cells or the lymphocytes from the donor find everything in my body to be foreign. They say, wait a second, this isn't where we grew up, this isn't our neighborhood, so we're just going to attack everything. And what it does is it attacks my skin, my hair, GI tract, my mouth, my eyes, all kinds of things. This is not my hair, this is a wig. My hair never came back, it probably never will. So that's a big effect. If these effects happen within the first 100 days, it's called acute, and that's typically your GI tract and your skin. If it happens after the first 100 days, it's chronic. It could last the rest of my life, or it could clear up next month. Nobody really knows. My biggest issues are my eyes. I have to have scleral lenses because my eyes no longer produce tears. So when I watch a sad movie and I cry, nothing comes out. So that's kind of weird. I also don't sweat a whole lot, which has its benefits. I don't usually smell too bad anymore. Not that I ever did to begin with, but and then there's all kinds of. I'm also, the other weird thing is I'm 38 years old, but I'm menopausal because as they were hanging that first bag of chemo back in 2014, the nurse looked at me and she's like, "Now you know this will sterilize you, right?" I'm like, no one ever told me that, and that was kind of heartbreaking. We have 3 boys. We really weren't sure we were done, but I guess God said we were done, so we're done. And then so I am menopausal, and I deal with that because I'm not old enough to be menopausal, and the doctors don't really always know what to do with me. I've been told I'm a special snowflake on more than one occasion. Just to show that I'm mostly normal, this is my counts for March of 2017, almost a year post-transplant. Everything is in the normal range. It's amazing how fast your body can recover. A couple interesting things that have happened, we're going to skip over that, I talked about it already. A couple interesting things that have happened is I had to start my newborn vaccinations all over. So you know like when you have a baby and you have to go in like every 2 months and get more shots? I had to do that because I had lost all my immunities. When my kids get sick, I usually get sick too, and I get stuff like, currently they're fighting croup. I'm just waiting. I'm probably going to get it because I get childhood illnesses now that most adults don't get because my immunities are gone. I can never get the chickenpox vaccine. I can never get the MMR vaccine because they're live vaccines, so I can't get those. I can only get like the ones that are not live. Milestones. I obviously hit 1 year. I survived the transplant process. That was a big deal. I'm almost to 3 years. I'll be 3 years in April, and if I make it that far, my chance of relapse drops significantly. And I am happy to say I'm halfway to my 5-year mark. I'm 2.5 years right now. So when I get to 5, I'm considered cured. So God willing, I will be there. These are some resources. All of my diagrams and my facts came from one of these places, mostly the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. I put my email up there because sometimes people have questions they don't want to ask in front of the entire group. Feel free to email me. I will get back to you and answer you. And, oh, that's my dog. She's not alive anymore, unfortunately, but she's a sweetheart. So I will take questions, and I think I made it just under the wire. Are there questions? Come on, somebody's got a question. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm interested to hear a little bit more from you about the process of learning about all this. You know so much about it. Can you tell us more about that?
I did a lot of research. It's a scary, scary thing to find out that you have leukemia. And I had a lot of time on my hands sitting in a hospital, so I did a lot of research. I've always been interested in medicine. I really wanted to be a bio minor and have that as a backup if music didn't work or whatever. So I took anatomy in college or high school. I took bio AP in high school. When I came to VU, I didn't need to take biology for music, but I took bio 2 and bio 1, I think. So I kind of knew a little bit, basic medical terminology and stuff. And then when you spend all the time in a hospital, you pick up a lot of stuff too, a lot of information. Other questions? Yeah?
Not so much a question, but a comment. I would encourage everyone in this room who is not on the donor registry to sign up for it.
Yeah.
I was on it for years, but there's an age limit, a particular age.
Yeah.
They dropped me from it. And when I got that message from them, I was extremely disappointed.
Yeah.
So I've been on the registry for 20 or 25 years probably.
Well, thank
So
you.
I would encourage all the students in particular, just go on.
Yeah.
Go on the website and register for it.
You can even do it here at Valpo. I believe the fraternities and sororities do a, correct me if I'm wrong, Valpo people, they do a dance-a-thon for the Children's Miracle Network, and at that event, it's in April usually, there is a Be the Match drive. So you can just walk up to the table, swab your cheeks, stick it in the little tube, and off it goes. And then you have the potential to save somebody's life, which is an incredible experience, I imagine. I know my husband's thankful somebody did that, because now he's stuck with me for a lot longer.
It's incredible to hear about the other people who we have inspired to sign up. That I know of at least 3 other people who have donated through this process too.
Yeah, a couple
just
from
that
Wheeler.
Would never have heard about this.
And there was someone from Valpo too, wasn't
There
there?
was.
From VU?
There was a student here a year ago that,
Yeah.
that matched.
Mm-hmm.
Tina.
Is there an age? Do children get bone marrow transplants?
They can, yeah.
They can.
Yep.
There's no age.
In fact, I know a little boy that is going through right now. Yeah.
They can't donate. But.
No, they can't donate. They can have a transplant
You
though.
can take it from any ages, no factor.
You have to be 18 to be on the registry.
A
Yeah.
child can get it from an adult.
Now, I know of a case, we have a family friend that the son, the little boy was born, or I don't think he was born, he had leukemia when he was very young, and then the older sister donated bone marrow for him, and she was 3, 4, she was very little. But that was a sibling, that was a matched through a sibling. Other questions? You guys got 5 more minutes, and I like to talk, so come on. Yeah?
How common is it for teenage boys to get leukemia?
I do not know the statistics on that. But if you want to talk more after, if you don't have a place to be, I'll talk to you. Yeah? No? Okay.
So like you said in your earlier story where you started to feel like that something was wrong and the doctor kept on telling you no, would you recommend if someone really feels like something is up and the doctor isn't really telling them about, would you encourage them to seek more help or to
Yeah.
talk to the doctor?
Yeah, I definitely had to advocate for myself. I don't know what people do who don't who don't advocate for themselves. I know it happens all the time that they fully trust their doctor, which is fine. I've got excellent doctors at Loyola. I've got excellent doctors now here in Valpo. But they're not perfect. That's why it says that doctors are practicing. They are practicing. They are becoming better and better. And sometimes they miss things. And my doctor did miss. And no fault of his. He is learning too. So, you move on. Thankfully, I found it, and someone else was able to help me. But yeah, I definitely say advocate for yourself if you are questioning. Definitely get another opinion. It doesn't hurt. Yeah.
Have they still not been able to find the root cause of the illness? It just came up randomly?
For me, yeah. Yeah, nobody knows where it came from. Like I said, I didn't have any of the risk factors. They don't really know why it relapsed. It wasn't really expected to relapse. But it did, so clearly God's plan for my life is different than my own. But here I am. And I think it's ironic that it's exactly 4 years to the day that I am standing. I never in a million years thought I'd be in a bio colloquium. I was a music major. I came in this building only if I had to. So it's pretty amazing that I'm here doing this with you guys today. Other questions?
How old are your boys now?
8.5, 6.5, and my little guy just turned 5. 2 of them are homesick with croup right now. My father-in-law's watching them. They're very excited. Papa's way more fun than Mommy. Yeah.
What did you do while you were in the hotel?
Oh, my caregivers were entertaining me. We had to play, they can tell you, we played board games, I read books, I watched lots of TV, lots and lots of TV. It was nice to watch something other than Daniel Tiger and Super Y from PBS, actually, real shows. What else? We had to walk a lot. I had to get a Fitbit. They told me I had to walk, wasn't it like 3 miles a day, something like that? They wanted me to walk. No, I was really weak, so we would go like in little increments. But at the same time, they said, I don't want your heart rate going over I think it was 100 or 110. So I used the Fitbit a lot to kind of monitor my heart rate and also keep track of how many miles I walked. So there was also just a lot of sleeping. I read a lot. I love to read, so I did that a lot.
Why did you have to walk a lot?
Because my body was so weak, they needed you to keep your muscles going, and it also kind of helped mobilize your blood cells too. Okay. So, and strengthen your immune system, which I had very little of. But yeah, walking was kind of essential. I had to keep doing that. Other questions? Yeah.
At the hospital, do they have counselors that come and talk to patients?
They do.
And this is a very difficult thing.
It is.
And how is that process, getting to know the counselors?
Honestly, I had an art therapist that would come in. She came in about once a week. There was a music therapist that would come around and play music. There were no animal therapists because too many germs with the dog. When you are signed up for a transplant, you are automatically given a psychologist. She only met with me, I think, twice. Because I have a counseling background, she would ask me the questions and I would answer them, and she basically felt like I could take care of myself. I was good at positive self-talk. I had a positive outlook. I had an incredible support system at home. I had a spiritual background and strong faith. So she kind of felt like I was going to be okay with that. She would check in every once in a while, but we didn't do counseling sessions per se. The other protocol is automatically they put you on Zoloft, which is an antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, and they just give that to you when you're diagnosed with leukemia because they know you're going to need it. So I guess that helped a little bit too. And then there was the chaplain, and Father Kevin, we're members over at St. T's. Father Kevin McCarthy came and visited at least once that I remember, probably more than that, and that helped. Other questions?
I think we're about out of time, so maybe if there's other questions, if not.
Yeah, I'll stick around out in the lobby.
Thank you so much for coming.
Sure, thank you guys so much.